Right. On to judgment. Mm. So I brought the card from the Gentle Tarot deck, which is a picture of a snake. But why don't I can read her little blurb and then we can launch from there. Judgment. When you can take in everything that is and has been your life, accept and embrace it all, you are reborn. It is time to dig deep into those hidden, dusty corners and coax the frightened little one out into the light. Love them. Embrace without judgment whatever shame or guilt has been stored away. The good, healthy experiences, along with the rough, hurtful ones. Each experience makes up who we are. Like this snake has freshly shed her skin, rise up to meet your higher self. Fulfill the promise you made to yourself upon arrival on this earth. Follow your true vocation. You know that you are ready to follow your truth. Feels like a really nice message after what we just did. Particularly like resonating with that, all all that all these rough patches and ugliness and scrapes and scars are what make us who we are.
Yeah, we've just had also the Libra full moon, and that's the scales. It's about balance, it's about judgment, it's about balancing self with other and having the discernment to know when you're in a people pleasing mindset or when you're in a arrogant mindset, only focused on self. So you have to be able to balance that, which is interesting, especially considering one of my doubts that I mentioned. So, and because this is the 20th card of the tarot, it's reduced to number 2, which is about partnerships, and
Mm.
so is Libra. So, how we one-on-one interact, whether that's with romance, business partnerships, but even the divine. What is that partnership like? How much of that am I going to give myself to? How much of my existence and my senses am I going to feel into while I'm present here and, able to exist given this gift of life?
I just want to mention a side note. It occurred to me when you mentioned, like, we're in the full moon of Libra, the scales, the judgment, with the judgment card. I remember when we had the lovers card, we were in Gemini, the twins, the two. So there is a pattern forming here, people.
Yeah, both air signs too, and so much to do with thought.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
well, I have more on the scales later, but yeah, I'm gonna take a break.
I feel like what Holly said, or describing the card, is pretty close to at least my interpretation of the classic
Uh,
Rider-Waite. I see it as a card that's about leveling up, about being called to the next sort of iteration of self. And I was looking at it today in preparation for this, and I had never really noticed before, but and you guys probably can't see from this, but like, this is the sea, this is an ocean, and that's referring to, let me just get my book of notes on the tarot, because I am trying to study this and I'm just working through card by card, so some cards have lots of notes and some have none. Okay, so it's in Revelation, the sea gives up its dead. That's what's happening in this card. And I don't know quite what to make of that, apart from, like the water of the sea feeling quite uterine and kind of womb-like, and the idea, if like the snake seems so appropriate because it's about rebirth, and I'm thinking about moving up and into the next version of selfhood, so you would have to come through another sort of birth canal, so coming out of the sea kind of makes sense to me. I'm not particularly in love with the aesthetic of this card, but I actually really like the message. And the other thing that I was thinking about, trying to like look at the word judgment from another perspective, and I thought of like in the Myers-Briggs thing, like judgment is judging or perceiving. So I read a little bit about that dichotomy, and like the powers of being able to see things somewhat objectively, and like take a step back and look at everything, and then sort of come almost, because I feel like there's a sort of finality to this card, and I feel like you sort of stand back and look at everything, and you come to a place of understanding that feels final, at least in that moment, and then that's your platform from which you can get up. But you have to take that step back and see everything before you can move on up. Also, interestingly, in the Thoth, which I don't have, but maybe I will get for my birthday this weekend. If I don't get it from someone else, I might get it for myself. The card is Aeon, which means new era, and we're talking a lot about new eras. So I thought and that's actually a really beautiful card. If you Google image the Thoth Aeon card, it's stunning.
That's so interesting, because revelation, I think of the word reveal, right? So it's revealing something that you haven't been able to see, which then creates a new horizon. And then yesterday, Sarah was giving her beautiful astrological report at Collective Journaling and was mentioning the card of the Tower, which also seems to really marry well with this card of the sea, and then the thing crumbling, like this invitation to sort of level down so that you can level up, like that creation destruction interplay.
Is the Tower 10? No,
16.
16.
Yeah. But I love that sense of revelation being the revealing of something you haven't seen before, and then that's inviting more information to create and to disassemble to reassemble in some ways.
And this guy, this Gabriel, is called the Revealer.
Ah, okay.
You're onto something.
Well, sorry, just wanted to say in my notes that the planet that's associated with the Judgment card is Pluto, which is also things that were once hidden being revealed.
For me, I think even when this card came up last time, I was a bit like iffy, because I don't think I have necessarily a good relationship with the word judgment. I think I've mentioned this before at some point, like almost, it's been more than a year by now, like around a year-ish ago, I got COVID, and that night I had like a crazy fever dream where I felt like I died, and a lot of things happened. But the last words I heard as I woke up was, "Witness, don't judge." And that really stayed with me for a long time. So yeah, so I since then, I think, at least more consciously, I've had this thing of like, oh, but do we need to judge anything at all? And then of course it's not like that, but it I've had that. And now, Rebecca, when you were talking about like, oh, it's a calling to level up and all these things, like I was talking to my sister the other day, and I was telling it like, oh, I have this, I don't know if it's a terrible thing, but I have this thing where like whenever I feel like I need to change, or part of me feels like I'm being disrespectful to my old self, even if the old thing was, I don't know, a worse iteration, or I don't know. But there's a part of me that like feels like, why should I change at all? Like that feels like I'm not being grateful to who I am now. And my sister was like, okay, but like look, when you get a haircut, you get a haircut. That doesn't mean that you don't respect your hair before. Like it just it just needs to happen because those changes are necessary, and you don't judge your old self thinking like, oh no, look at all my beautiful hair that I lost. And then like but I don't know why I have that, but it's something that I really struggle with, is like how to allow that leveling up in a way that feels respectful, and not just like, oh yeah, previous me was a piece of shit. I know it's like I'm making it very black and white, but I have a tendency to do that sometimes. So especially when it comes to judging. So weirdly enough. So yeah, I don't know, I don't have a strong conclusion here, just my thoughts around that so far.
It's interesting. I've been thinking about different words and how they reveal the nature of the universe in some ways. So like ah, it's like an opening ah, that's like a more focused penetration. And judge, there's like a spewing of it's a guttural, it's a gravitational expulsion of sorts. And I'm so with you, right? Because being judgmental, I remember looking at Forrest Landry's work about that, and like decision, and this idea of cutting off, like it's a cutting off. You have infinite number of paths, and then you choose one, and that's cutting yourself off from a lot of different things. And so then this shadow side of judgment, of cutting people off, like judging them, saying like making them very static, foreclosing on possibility. But then also, like I love this leveling up, because as I was reflecting on this yesterday, similar, like, oh, judgment is such a makes me, really collapse. But then I was thinking about initiation, and how there's like a judgment in that, like where you go through this journey, like, and then did you complete the task? Did you, in this book I've been talking a lot about, right, with the boy's initiation, at the end, if the fruit is ripe, then their soul has been rescued. If the fruit is sour or gross or whatever, right, like, or underripe or overripe, then the judge they didn't their soul didn't get cooked. Sort of, there does need to be kind of a recognition that like putting a period at the end of the sentence, that it's time, right, like you said, to sort of level up or take on a new
Make a
mission.
pivot.
Yeah.
Some of the key words that are here that are kind of resonating with the discussion, because like they're alternative words, and I think you'll like them, are liberation, which I really like, instead of judgment. Or I guess with going along with judgment, there's liberation once you have a key phrase that they have here is reevaluation and acceptance. So accepting a certain one after you've reevaluated yourself from the past. And yeah, trying to decide what to prune away, what things to just like what things are old values that you held, and what things are coming up now that are new values that you hold. And yeah, another thing, when you were talking about that story, the Thoth and Anubis, and the scales that were used in order to grant someone access into the Garden of Reeds for the afterlife, and their heart is weighed against a feather.
Mm. Oof.
And yeah, if the heart is heavier than the feather, then they're not granted access. If it's lighter than the feather, then they are. So that's interesting, because the judgment is actually in that situation coming from an external entity. And I think a lot of what we've been discussing so far has been like self-doubt.
I feel like there's something almost yeah, maybe liberating is the right word, but about being someone judging you and telling you that judgment. It's like, oh, so now I know what you think. Okay, thank God. I don't have to speculate for the rest of my life about what's going on in your head. You think I'm worthy or you think I'm unworthy, but at least I know. Because I think a lot of like what troubles me is that guessing what people are thinking about me or how the world perceives me in general. And there is some kind of, it feels like yeah, there's something freeing about it. And cutting some kind of cord. And I'm also wondering if like the self-judgment thing, is it actually self-judgment? Because when I'm judging myself, I'm often jumping into the brain of some imaginary archetypal figure and thinking about what they think about me. I'm not even sure if I am judging myself. I'm like doing it by proxy through this weird process.
I was gonna on what you were saying about there being that liberating feeling when somebody tells you their real true feelings. It's similar to that when you finally have made the decision. I'm gonna move forward on this path. It's like, okay, now I can let go of all that other garbage, all the other baggage, and this is it. This is what I've chosen. This is the path I'm gonna be on. And that's like, yeah, freeing. In that constriction. It's like poetry. Like you've got certain guidelines that now you have to stick to and abide by, and it's not so everything's a possibility, the world is your oyster. It becomes like, this is the path I'm on now, and there's something freeing about no longer having to juggle ideas. What am I going to do?
The feather that the Egyptians used to wear, it's called the feather of truth, right? I think it's called the feather of truth. I'm not sure, but I think that's what came to mind when you talked about this feather. And I'm thinking now of judgment is, of course, the picture is Judgment Day, when Christ was supposed to come back and judge. And that was indeed the day then when you would know, everyone would know who is part of the sheep and who are goats, who are wheat and who are, what is that?
Calf.
Yeah, thank you. I only know these things in Afrikaans. I don't know it in English. So there is indeed that you will know, that you will finally know on which side you're on.
And that's interesting. Who makes that judgment? It's like the sacred. Like there's something there. It's like we judging each other versus like the sacred, or it feels like Play-Doh for me right now. I'm like not clear, but I'm just sort of shaping and touching it and playing with it. And it was also striking me liberation, as Sarah was saying, and then Libra, like how those in the scales of the snake, snake. But the idea of shedding a skin feels a lot more welcoming to me and helpful, because no one decides when that snake skin gets shed. It's like there's a bigger pattern at play, and that pattern is sort of the ultimate judge, I guess.
I do feel that we are called to being judges of ourselves in a certain sense, and then in the positive sense of deciding which path we're gonna. I was reading Paul Tillich again and his theology, and he speaks there of destiny and freedom in one of his books. And then he says, well, the two are connected. It's not that you don't have freedom because of you have destiny, but we choose our destiny by our choices. And there is an element of judgment in every choice, because every choice that you make, he also mentions, cuts off so many other possibilities. And that does call for that knife of judgment too. So I think there's two different ways to look at judgment. The negative one of emotional judgment, I almost want to say, and then condoning. I think we should maybe rather call that condoning than judgment. And then the positive judgment of judging what is good and what is bad, what is optimal and what is suboptimal in this situation. Because judgment, I think we've made it a negative, but we've let it be condoning and not using your reason, using your human abilities to discern the truth, because that's actually judgment, to discern the truth.
Yeah, that was the word that I wanted to throw in, was discernment for the positive. And yeah, because there's even like Planet Fitness here at the gym. It's like no judgment zone, you know? So yeah, we totally usurped the meaning of
Don't
the
use your
word.
reasoning.
Yeah.
No judgment.
Logic here in the gym.
You should just tuck the tarot card behind that sign as you go in. I'll take the rest of my deck in, but I can't take this card.
That is classic.
Yeah, I guess for me, the thing that kind of keeps the image that keeps coming up as everyone is kind of sharing their stuff is, I mean, judgment has this thing of this vibe to me of like an observer creating. Like there's something about judgment that it's not explicitly like that, because I mean we talked about the scales, but there's something about it that it feels to me like speaking something into being. Like it's something that is spoken out loud. It's like this gestalt thing of like, this is the thing you need to focus, and everything else it's cut off or goes into the background. And that loose, because I don't think anything is ever like fully like a sharp end from A to B, but whatever that is kind of is what gives shapes to things. Like so maybe you do need judgment to like have entities at all, to separate one thing from another, to have those boundaries, to cut off all the other things that are not. And I guess so that in itself doesn't make judgment a bad thing. What I guess my concern is, if we only rely on judgment for knowing what is true, or if we only rely, like there's something there still that I'm like, okay, yes, I know we needed to define this in a certain way, or we needed some sort of judgment to create these boundaries, but there's this part of me that knows like what science has done and what where we are now, where like, well, yeah, but then we only focus on what's boundable and like what happens to the waves in the back. And maybe it's just that judgment has to have a partner, or it's paired with something else, and I haven't quite landed on what that is. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's I guess now I'm saying that, okay, maybe judgment is more about defining things so we can have a relationship with them. But then I always want to have that grain of salt and that suspicion, playful suspicion about defining things too much, or about relying solely on judgment to define what is and what isn't. Yeah.
I was thinking when Holly was speaking, when Ether was speaking of the sacred, and I really do not have this in words yet. But when you say like, because for me, judgment is not necessarily only rational. It's it's somehow bound to the sacred.
Mm.
And if we can judge from the perspective of the sacred, or something like that, or judge with from by when we are enthusiastic, when we are imbued with the sacred, that type of judgment. So it's not just rational measuring, or not that at all. It's a deeper type of I don't know, but
I almost feel like the negative form of judgment that doesn't exist in Planet Fitness, like that. That is kind of like a block for accessing the ability to do the kind of more integrative judging that Lazelle's talking about. Because when I think of myself judging myself, it's like I'm not allowing myself to do that for real. I'm doing it via the proxy. I'm like thinking, what will he think? What will she think? Whatever. What will the man think? And I feel like probably if I could let that tendency to jump in and judge through other people's eyes drop, then I would find something deeper and more helpful that would actually provide that leveling up function. But my brain is so clouded, and I'm sure this is true of everyone living in like modern society, with this constant call to present yourself in different forms, like, you know, like conveniently flat and on a screen.
Shallow. So
Yeah,
shallow.
exactly. Yeah. And that's so loud and such a dominant force in my psyche that it kind of drowns out the more subtle, like, connection to the sacred type of judging that would actually be useful.
Yeah, I've been really meditating on silence, and like, so as you were speaking, like, it's really loud, and noticing how anything like a real potency in beauty and creation, judgment, comes from the silence. It doesn't come from the noise. It comes from the silence. So when I find myself in doubt, these two things have been so prominent for me lately. Life is so calling me into a deeper relationship with silence and with patience.
I'm thinking now, as you were speaking, that maybe one way to, because obviously what we have here is very valuable to all of us, and I feel like all of us know that we grow immensely through this. But being able to judge each other in a positive way, then to help each other see the truth, is also really valuable. But what I was thinking, the negative judgment form, maybe one way to combat it is by that all-embracing universal love, that love, that judgment within unconditional love.
Mhm.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. Like judgment for the benefit of someone.
Yes.
Like your parents do for you when they're like, I need to know who you're hanging out with, where you're going to be, what time you're going to be there. It's because they want to protect you. They don't want something bad to happen and them not know about it. So, yeah, there's end discernment over, potential partners or, friends and things like this. I was talking with someone yesterday about, yeah, there have been times in the past where my parents were like, okay, guess you're going to go do that thing. And wonder from my own perspective, was that a cry out for help me figure out what the hell to do here? What am I supposed to do with life? So I wonder if like part of that rebellion is to feel that unconditional love of being judged, being watched, being observed, being noticed. It's like, okay, you have skin in the game, you have scales in the game, right? Like there's something here that you're so concerned about that you're willing to risk, me being upset with you. And I think that's really important too, is being willing to have people be upset with you, giving them that space. Because sometimes they need that too. They need to take their anger out on somebody. And if you're willing to be that person, that can be a huge benefit for somebody to say, oh, I'm really angry with this person. Well, maybe they're not so bad. They got my best interest in mind. And like they can work it out themselves after a few hours, after a few days, after a few weeks, maybe years. But it tends to be that people will come back and realize that you had their best interest in mind when you said something. I had so many friends tell me to get out of my relationship. I wasn't telling them that I was getting choked. I didn't tell them I had a black eye because I was scared of the judgment. And women do that. We're terrified of being judged. We don't want to be called out because then we feel singled out. Then we feel unlovable. Oh, there's something wrong with me or whatever it is. I'm an idiot for staying with this guy. That was the judgment I was casting on myself, and I didn't want to tell anybody else because I didn't want them to do that same thing to me. And they would never have said that. They would have helped me. So that was like a little bit of arrogance on my part and not wanting to accept unconditional love, only wanting to give love to someone that wasn't in love with me. And allowing him to judge me and me to judge myself based on his judgment. So it was like a spiral of all kinds of judgment.
I completely feel that, like not wanting to reveal stuff about yourself, even though revealing it would help, because then the people, your friends or whatever, would probably, support you. And I think it's something about not wanting to be seen as flawed, like just wanting to be like the finished product already. But then that cuts you off to the opportunity to move up, because you don't have, like, if you don't let people see your flaws, then how are you gonna, like, I keep using this word, but move up to the next level. I just see it in the card. But it's so scary to show people your flaws, especially if that kind of negative judgment has been leveled at you in the past, where you have been seen as flawed and then someone has discarded you because of those flaws instead of giving you the unconditional love. So it's like that, like, to accept judgment, you have to have this fundamental trust in yourself, in that, like, anything that is wrong with me is something that is not, like, permanent, or is not, whatever. And then you have to have the trust in the other person that they're and sometimes that trust is obviously misplaced because some people are assholes. So it's like, and thinking not to rush ahead or anything, but the card that comes after this is the World. That's what you become after you go through judgment. So I'm wondering which card I would pick to be the one where you get the trust piece, because I don't feel like I'm ready for this card. I need to go through whichever card. So I heard someone saying that each of the cards is like a doorway that you have to pass through, and I need to pass through the trust doorway, whichever one that is, before I can get to this one.
Well, I have news for you, Rebecca, because no, it's just funny because I didn't quite mention it, but when we were having the show and tell a few days ago, I think one word that kept coming up, even if it wasn't so explicitly said to me, was trust. And I realized I don't have a sigil for trust, which is weird because I have a lot of them.
Wow.
And I have them for a lot of important words. So after that, now I have one, and I drew it today in the mud, which now covers my face. So I'll send you that picture later.
That's amazing.
For me, I guess when I think about sharing my terrible, terrible things with people, I don't know if I'm so scared of being judged as I am scared of suddenly, if I give you that knowledge, then now my burden is also yours. that's what I have. I feel like as soon as I'm not just the one who holds this, then that means now, yeah, now that you know this will also torment you. so 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 yeah, there and I was kind of surprised because I don't know really anything about tarot, but when you said like, oh, the one after judgment is the world, because maybe there's something about that as well. It's like maybe judgment is not meant to be as individual as we think it is. Maybe there's something about judgment that is really a calling of like, in my case, okay, maybe sharing that burden. If I share with a lot of people, okay, we can kind of all carry it together.
Mhm.
So, um, so yeah, I don't know. I thought that was interesting. And one last thing, because Holly, you said two words that really, and then Giselle started talking about love. Because I even looked up, I was looking up the notes that I have. Because I remember reading Eric Fromm, and then I also remember reading Rilke, and they were both almost the same words, but a little bit different. He talks about like love as being some sort of art, like a practice. It's something that you need to live. And he was like, okay, there's like three requirements for love, and those three requirements are patience, concentration, and discipline. That's what Fromm says. And then Rilke says patience, quiet, and concentration. So it's like silence and patience. They're both kind of there for both of them in different ways. Um, so I don't know. And I keep seeing these three things, maybe with different words, but like, yeah, discipline, concentration, patience, or patience, concentration, silence, come up everywhere. It comes up in the I Ching. It comes up in, I don't know, everywhere I look. So I thought it was interesting because like, oh, those are like the three things that build love. And then Lizelle started talking about love as the real judgment we need. So I thought it was like an interesting connection.
I want to change concentration to attention.
Mhm.
I think that's what it is. I think
Yeah.
that's what it is.
I just got so excited, Issa. You just like elicited this like it me like my face feels like it's gonna fucking blow off right now. Um, just yeah, the sense that oh my gosh, like our burdens, our darkness, our scars, our wounds, our shit. Oh, thank you, dung beetles. My God, the dung beetles. That sometimes if we withhold those, then we're actually withholding a gift for somebody else. Like that might be like my shit might be someone else's fuel and food and energy that to use their skill and their gift. And sorry, this is really touching because it's such an invitation to not, if I see that as a gift, then it becomes so much less scary to reveal because maybe someone else is the magician that's going to alchemize, that needs to alchemize that. And of course, there's that discernment as we're talking about, which I think can only come through silence. The other word is relaxation for me. I cannot, all my good decisions come from a place where my body is not tensed up. But it makes me so much less afraid to actually share some of my darkness because maybe that darkness is food and fuel for someone else. Because we're all one organ, like we're all actually just part of, we're all a piece of it. We're all a piece of the same body. And we all have different jobs to do within that body.
And that brings me back to liberation. Because if you honestly share your darkness, then I can just let my mask fall as well.
Yes.
And in your acceptance of your darkness, I can find acceptance for my darkness, if nothing else.
Because it was like that doubt circle. Each of your share was my share.
Mm.
Each of your pain and heartache and fear is my fear. You help me see myself and validate that.
And what I wanted to say that I'm going to say now is when we start seeing each other's shit, when we start seeing the contorted parts of each other, That's not when we're going to fall apart. That's when we're truly going to come together.
Because that's when we actually see each other.
Yes.
That has also been kind of in the air for me. Is like maybe true judgment is just being able to see yourself.
Hence the feather of truth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. A couple of things are coming up because feathers are modified scales. Biologist in me just has to tell you that. Scales too, with the snake on that card, the Kundalini awakening, and that being a brand new life for some people when they have that. Personally haven't experienced it, so I can't say one way or another, but awakening in itself always, brings about this feeling of something just brand new, completely different. There's no way to unsee whatever it was. And then with this idea of, somebody else's shit, I just think of compost and how rich that is for my garden. How much most people don't want to deal with it. But more and more people are starting to volunteer now at the community garden, and there's another girl that wants to build soil. And so that's what we are endeavoring to do, is reincorporate our waste into nature and make it a closed cycle again, instead of just us reaping all of the resources and then constructing them into things that don't break down. This is permanent. This will stay here forever. These molecules are aligned in this orientation and they can never move. It's like a hoarder. Just collect plastic because lots of carbon, lots of hydrogen. I like it, want to keep it here compact. So, it was coming up for me. Thinking about this idea of a snake being like, I don't want to leave these scales behind. What can I do with them? I can't shed these feathers, like a bird's building a nest with its feathers sometimes even because they're reusing their waste. But what if there's this bird that's not pruning itself, not cleaning itself? It looks all dingy and, not to be judgmental or anything, but maybe you should shed some of those feathers.
Which is what I was saying earlier. It's like when my sister told me,
Yeah.
when you get a haircut, it doesn't mean you hate your old self. You just need to get a haircut. Like, yeah.
And it's cutting off that. It's like, I feel like refusing to see the light or rescue the light is kind of part of judgment, when you refuse to rescue that light, like you see the shit as just like, you don't actually see the value, because everything has inherent value. And I think that's part of our job in this life, in this world, is to bring alive the beauty and the value of everything around you. And sometimes that pruning is like, in order for more light, like when I pruned that tree, it was like, I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I have to kill all these trees around you. Feeling like, ugh, about that. But then it was like, no, like the tree was so happy. It was just like the haircut. It was like, oh, it's falling away. And now these limbs, these dead limbs that I've hauled off, can be habitat for something else. And so, yeah, judgment in some ways feels like a refusal to find the value or rescue the light from something.
I want to go exactly against what you said. Everything that you said now is actually judgment.
Mhm.
That is true discernment, to be able to see the light
Yes.
in the that is true discernment. Um,
Yes.
So I agree with everything you said except the last sentence. But judgment, refusing to see a judgment is exactly seeing that.
What would you call what I was naming? What would you call that?
Judgment. What you were naming it. Seeing the light through the shit. That's judgment. That's discernment. pruning the tree that needs to be pruned. That's judgment. That's discernment.
But what's not
It's
seeing it? What would you call not seeing it?
avoidance, hiding from
Yeah,
judgment,
denial.
denial.
I think the reason, I mean, it's kind of obvious to say probably, but the reason we're so fucked up around judgment has got to be, you know, historical. And I like what I'm thinking of is the Scarlet Letter. Do you guys read that book?
Love it. I
Like,
love it.
yeah, I just reread it recently. It's an amazing book. But like that, what happens to Hester Prynne? You know, she has the Scarlet A on, and she has to wear it on her breast forever because she's an adulteress, and that is a judgment that has been passed on her. And that is like almost like an archetypal judgment. And that's when we're talking about the negative type of judgment. That's kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about some guy in authority speaking on behalf of some, I guess, in theory, divinity, but really it's just like this cultural construct that like enforces power relations being a certain way, that puts her in her place and judges her and says, this is who you are. You've been reduced to this letter. This is all you are, and it's all you will ever be. And obviously, everyone since those times, especially women, I guess, but everyone has been like, fuck that kind of judgment. We're not interested at all. And so we just push it all away. Just like, no judgment. And yeah, I think maybe we need to scrap, maybe the word judgment needs to go, and we need 2 new words for the 2 different types of things, because the word judgment is just so loaded. And it also made me think of this idea I've been having lately, that there is some wisdom, limited wisdom, in that like Christian, maybe more Catholic idea of, you know, we're all dreadful sinners, and that's where we start. Like, there's no pretending not to be a sinner, because if you're of this religious persuasion, and I'm not super familiar with it, but this is just what I've come to understand from reading stuff. I saw something, it was like this guy proposing a sign for his church, and it was like he wanted to put welcoming losers since like the millennium, because everyone's a loser, right? That's their whole thing. Christians accept that they are fundamentally flawed, you know, and they know that about each other, and there is a certain sense of community which is really beautiful that they can build out of that if it works right. And it's just so funny that I have these two ideas in my head of that, the community of losers or helping each other out and trying to be better, and then that Scarlet A being stitched onto the woman's chest, and it's both coming from the same historical scene of Christianity. And I don't really know what to make of it, but I feel like it would be interesting to talk to someone who wasn't brought up within a, you know, Judeo-Christian culture frame, and show them this card and say, what do you make of this? Like, and see if they came up with some different insight. Maybe they'd have their own problems with the word. I don't know.
Yeah, I have a short thing, because Rebecca, when you said it, I was like, that's it. Like you said, reductive, right? Like when a judgment is reductive, like that A, versus I think what Holly was describing is it's a judgment that leads to more relationship, like it leads to more connection. It's not this condensation of like over judgment, like of I'll make you so defined that you cannot ever escape this box. Whereas this other judgment seems to be like, no, this is the boundary that I'm setting, so you can have an A and a B and a link between them. And that's, I think, very different. So maybe that was the keyword that I was like, that's it for me. It's like reduction versus interconnection.
I love this. Do we need to rescue judgment from its more rooted origins, or are there new words? And I'm really liking discernment quite a bit, and I'm really excited also to sit with avoidance and denial. I think that's also another great.
That just struck me as funny. I'm really excited to sit with avoidance and denial. Me too.
I love words. I love them. They make me feel.
You're ready for a fun time, huh? Whoop whoop.
Denial. All right. But it is interesting, right? The snake tried to deny shedding its skin, avoid the skin's shedding. What were those people doing to Hester, right? Was that her name in the book?
Yeah.
They were denying their own sacral chakra and root chakra. Anyways, yes, it's fun. It'll be fun to see.
Yeah, and I know this probably never really happens in nature because animals know better, but like what would actually happen if that snake refuses to go out of its skin? Like I don't know if it would like suffocate to death or something, but it would probably die. Like it couldn't receive whatever it needs its skin to do and whatever function those scales do when they interact with the exterior. It wouldn't have any of that anymore. Right? It's literally like trapped in its own skin. And yeah, I mean,
Yeah, what if you refuse to take a shit or throw up? You just can't.
Or move. I mean, I don't even think it could move because, I can't move because I might scratch one of these scales off. So I got to stay here in this one position.
Forever.
Maybe that is exactly the difference between discernment and condemnation. Condemnation makes you unable to move. Condemnation binds your skin to you and puts you in a box and puts an A on you, and that's what discernment liberates you.
Am I the only one where she's totally cutting up and cutting out?
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
No, I was cutting up for myself as well.
Okay, now you're back. Okay, you're back, Mazel. I got liberation and discernment, and that's what I got. And then it kind of, but I want to hear I'd love to hear what you were saying.
I kept quiet then because I saw I froze. So, but I think I said everything that while you were still moving. It's just that's the liberation and entrapment. That's the difference between discerning and condemning.
Yeah, I love that. Liberation and entrapment.
And that's why maybe in that card, I can't see it well because I'm not familiar with it, but are they like coming out of a coffin or something?
Yeah.
Like,
So it's
right?
supposed to be,
So it's quite literally coming out of the entrapment of like being confined.
being called out by the Gabriel blowing his trumpet. Yeah. Which is interesting. It's not like the snake that just feels that the time is right to shed their skin, but there is a calling to move on.
Yes.
But I feel like the snake also has a calling. It's just really not as obnoxious. But
yeah, that's true.
The calling is there, right? In the weather, in the moisture in the air, and the heat.
Well, I think it probably is. Like I one time had an experience of becoming kind of like a snake, and it was very uncomfortable. It was so much shaking and yeah. I mean, that's part of the avoidance and denial, right? Is like, I don't want to feel all this. I don't want to feel it all. It's so intense. And so who's going to be on the other side? And I like my skin. Or maybe I don't actually.
You're comfortable in your skin.
Yeah. You're familiar with it. You may not even like it, but you're familiar. You understand it. Yeah.
That's where trust comes in again. It's trusting that you'll be able to see whatever is on the other side.
Yes. And patience as well, right?
Judgment is the call to level up. I like that.
Now I feel like I'm in a video game.
All the talk of shedding skins is making me think of this really evocative passage in I think is in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, in the C.S. Lewis, in one of the Narnia books. Do you guys know, like, so there's this kid and he's like a nightmare. He's like a really selfish, greedy kid. I think there's a great line where it says his name was Eustace and he was exactly the sort of person who deserved that name. Like, and he just goes about the whole story being horrible and selfish and unpleasant child. And then they go to an island and he happens upon a dragon's lair, and he's, you know, overcome with lust for all the wealth he finds there, like all the gold and stuff. And he puts on one of the bracelets that the dragon has collected, and he sleeps there in the dragon sword, which everyone knows is a bad idea, apart from this kid apparently. And then he wakes up a dragon, and at first he's like, brilliant, I'm so powerful, I can smash stuff down, blah blah blah. I can burn things. And then he realizes how desperately lonely it is to be a dragon, because he can't communicate with all his friends are scared of him and stuff. And then there's this bit where he's and the ring that he put around his human wrist is starting to hurt because he now has big dragon hands. So he's like in torture, like it's really, really painful, and also alone and scared and all that stuff. And he's generally despairing. And Aslan comes along and basically strips him of his skin in successive layers. So he like takes a claw and claws a big gash down his side and then rips it off, and it's horribly painful. And then he does it again and again and again and again until there's a little boy there. And that's kind of like his transformative moment. And then from then on, he doesn't become like nice or anything, but he, you know, he has a different orientation towards the world, which makes his experience and everyone else's experience of him much more positive. But I that thing of like shedding skin and the weirdness of like how you would think, like when I take off my clothes at the end of the day, it's still the same body I had on in the morning when I put them on. But it's not how it works when you shed skin. You take off the outer layer and then there's something new underneath that you didn't actually know was there. And that's the story of Eustace, like that there is actually this kind of okay kid underneath everything. So that there's something weirdly like two forces in going in two opposite directions, like a movement up into something new, but also a movement down. I don't know.
Going backwards and going forwards at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I had this kind of image of like, when you said like your skin that is under there that was forming and you didn't know, yet the you who is now, whatever you are doing now, like eating or living or dancing or tanning or whatever it is that you're doing now to your body, is forming that skin. So it's like your current self taking care of whatever comes next without actually knowing what it's going to look like. And it's that trust between now and the future.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I really want to show you. Can I share my screen?
Oh,
yeah. See why I want this deck?
Wow.
But like the new thing inside the old.
That's awesome. What's the name of this deck? The Thoth?
Thoth, yeah. Thoth, I think. Thoth?
It's like a Gaelic. Is this like
No, it's the Egyptian. It's referring to the Book of Thoth. Yeah, or it could be Thoth. I don't know how you pronounce it. It's Crowley's deck.
wow.
An amazing artist, Frida Harris, did the artwork for it. Yeah, it's pretty old. I can't remember when it was made.
But that Hebrew letter is an S. I can't remember what you call it in Hebrew, but you pronounce it as an S. Yeah.
Beautiful. Consensus.
Oh, it was so nice to see all of you. I'm going to go and have a birthday dinner now.
Okay.
I just got to go get dressed up, and I'm going to go meet Kat because it's her birthday tomorrow. So we have a joint birthday fun time dinner. And we both got each other a mug, so I'm really looking forward to getting my mug.
All right, much love to you all, and I will see you all next time. Soon.
Bye.
In my heart, in my dreams.
Bye.
Bye.